Welcome to the Universal Inclusion Podcast, where we spotlight the voices shaping a more diverse and inclusive future in space. In each episode, we bring you stories from trailblazers across the industry, from engineers and entrepreneurs to activists and artists, all breaking barriers in their own way. So, if you're ready to get inspired, let's dive in. In today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Sheri Wells-Jensen, who shatters the myth that sight is the only way to experience the wonder and awe of space. In our conversation, we dive into who belongs in space and why the grit, resilience, and strength of disabled individuals is exactly what space exploration needs. Dr. Sheri is a professor of linguistics at Bowling Green State University in Ohio and has served as the Library of Congress NASA Chair in Astrobiology, Exploration, and Scientific Innovation. Her research focuses on human factors in space exploration, and she is dedicated to making outer space accessible to all of humanity. Hello, Sheri, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So I ask everybody, what drew you to space?
Oh, I love this question because it's an opportunity to talk about the big things. And I think that whenever you get to talk about big things, you really should, because in our day-to-day life, we just talk about, can I have a different spoon? And these shoes are too tight. And can this line please move faster? So I think when we have a chance to talk about big things, we should really grab it. So grabbing it. I think that I love this question partly because it gives me a minute to talk about things that are real. And sometimes when people think about a fully blind person, I'm 100% blind. And sometimes when people think about a blind person wanting to do things about the stars, there's this inevitable kind of poignancy that comes over them. Oh, you want to do science in the stars, but you've never seen the stars. Yeah. And although if that feeling works for you to make the world a better place in some way, if that's a push towards justice for you in some way, okay, but that's not what my experience is. I don't walk around all day going, oh damn, I haven't seen the stars, because that sense of wonder, that place where the veil is thin for me, came when I was a kid going outside at night, either in the kind of still vastness of winter or in summer where you could hear all the little noises all around you, and that sense of feeling very alone and yet very connected with everything. Each of us probably has a place where wonder breaks through. And for me, it was being outside at night and thinking about possible worlds and how I might fit in and what I could maybe do with my life. And how, if you think about science fiction, and I was, of course, like many of us, a complete desperate science fiction nerd as a child, and still thinking about how you can imagine a world that's better than the world you're in, even if the world you're in is already kind of filling you with a sense of awe. But you can imagine a world that's better, and you can imagine yourself moving into and toward that world and maybe using some of that momentum to make things better, right? To make the world we're in better. And so for me, it was that sense of expansiveness and awe and humility, and also being connected with other people without judgment, which somehow in science fiction, when I was a kid, I read this stuff. I was a Star Trekkie, right? I read the Star Trek stuff where everything was beautiful. And in the sense that you could use that power source to make things better for you and for the world as it is.
Oh, I love that. You know, that sense of awe, it drew me in as well. And, I've talked quite a lot on this podcast that I did not see myself in the space industry at all. But I was interested in space and the stars, and yes, as well into Star Trek and into my favorite movie, Contact. And not to date myself, but I always seem to, we had the VHS. And these were the times where your parents buy like a handful of VHS tapes, and it is what it is. You better love it because you're going to have it on repeat. But Contact was one we had, and I watched it over
Right.
and over again. I loved it. I loved this. I love anything that I can't quite put my hands on. There's no real concrete answer. The unknown is just so poignant. And not that this is, a podcast dedicated to the movie Contact, though it could be happily. But in that movie, they're listening. They're listening for sounds from extraterrestrials. And when I was doing research about you for this episode, I discovered that that's an interest topic for you because you have a background in linguistics. So, can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts related to talking to the unknown and possible extraterrestrial life?
You know, what you always want, what we all want, okay, we love contact, right? What we want though, every linguist wants to be Amy Adams, and we all want to be, you know, the linguist in the movie Arrival, where they're like, you, I'm sending the black helicopter. It's you. Come on, get on the helicopter. We're gonna go figure out the alien language. Let's go. That's what we all want. We all want that terror and that joy and that sense that you're really doing something new. And so it is the same, you know, whenever you encounter a new language, you're kind of like, oh, what does this one do? That's cool. And so you wonder about, as a linguist, I wonder a lot and I think a lot about, so what are the parameters? What could a language be like? Which makes you take a step back even before that, which is to the place where you think, well, what is an alien mind like? What are alien thoughts like? And you don't have to get super abstract about that. You can think about things like, well, I have the thoughts I have, and I also have 2 arms and 2 legs, and I walk around with my feet down and my head up, and I have this body, and it works the way it does, and that influences my cognition, right? And what influences your cognition influences your language. So, for example, if the aliens had a different body plan, how would that influence the way that their language worked? And would it, if they had a different set of sensory inputs, would that make it different? I mean, that's one side of it, this wonder of, wow, it could be almost anything. Suzette Hagen Eldon has this great set of books where the linguists are out trying to learn, you know, all the languages. It's called Native Tongue, recommended. And one of the things that is sort of background in her novels is that if the aliens are basically humanoid, we could learn their languages. And if they're not humanoid, we could never learn them. And literally the little brains of the little babies exposed to those languages literally exploded, and it's gross. But I mean, probably what we're going to get is something a little more like contact, right? Probably what we're going to get, given, despite my dreams to the contrary, probably what we're going to get is a radio signal. And so it becomes a playground for math geeks and for code breakers, which is also fun, right? And so probably, although I would love to be Amy Adams, that'd be great. Probably what
It's
we're going to get is a
possible.
signal, and we'll all just sit around with our computers and fuss at it, right? And we'll send the signal to as many people as possible. Everyone will be working on it, and we'll see if we can make any sense of it. And it'll probably be, you know, start with math, but then from there, what will we get? We just don't know.
Exactly. We don't know, which is the fun part. I mean, we are still discovering communication of living beings on Earth. And
Yes.
what I what I get in that is that we're a little bit arrogant as humans. We're a little bit arrogant that if we can't see something, if something doesn't connect to the way that we experience something, we usually kind of write it off. But I mean, with extraterrestrial life, we will be forced if the scenario is they come to us or we go to them, we'll be
Mhm.
forced to really think outside the box about what we are encountering and how we can translate that back.
Yes. And to be fair, well, I mean, to be honest, we have to think about the fact that we share this planet with other beings already who are very intelligent and have
Mhm.
feelings. And then we have to think, well, okay, what have we done about that? Are we, for example, acknowledge them as sentient beings and protecting their environment and making sure they live safe? Or do we just sort of, eat them? And I think that if we are going to think about going out to encounter other beings, we have to first off think about the other beings, other species on our Earth. And then maybe we ought to take 10 seconds to think about how we treat each other. So how do we treat people who are different from us? Are we good with that? And you know what, we really aren't.
Yeah.
In moments of excess, in moments of peacefulness, in moments when my personal needs are met, I can reach out to any other human being on the planet and go, yay, let's be friends. But our history as a species seems to indicate, alas, that if we feel stressed or angry or sad, or if our needs aren't met, we are not Amy Adams meeting the new aliens, let's make friends, even amongst ourselves. So, maybe as we're thinking about reaching out to the stars, we really, really, really ought to be paying a little more attention to how we reach out here, because we could practice just to pick something. We can practice being nice to each other. Hello, and trying to communicate with each other on Earth and not just pretend like, okay, we've got this test to do. We're not doing it very well, but give me a different thing and I'll do better. I swear. Maybe we ought to spend some time thinking about how we treat one another and how we treat the animals and the other species that we have right here.
100%. I always think, who would want to play with us in the playground of the universe? Who wants to come play? Because we have a horrific track record up to this
Yeah,
very second in terms of how we treat one
we do.
another, how we validate one another. If beings were to come on down, really crack open and look at even just the last 48 hours, I think they'd be like,
Yeah,
I'm not sure if this is safe for me. Do I want to interact? I mean,
right.
so
Right,
I
and so,
think,
like, how am I gonna treat a two-headed guy?
yeah.
Like, if I can't be kind to, like, what if the aliens, look like pigs? What if they're piggish, And you think, the pig, like, they come down and they're thinking, "Oh, look, there are people that look like." Oh, no, is that how you treat the other mammals on your planet that look like me? Maybe?
And
I'm gonna give
we'll
y'all
make
a miss.
memes. We'll make memes right away. I know us. I know how we roll. We'll, if the beings look so different or there's some kind of comedic, it'll be on a late night show poked fun at. We don't have a history of really sitting down and thinking of the perspective of how does someone else feel. So this kind of leads to another vein, another specialty you have, which is disability studies in space. And there's a lot right now, an interesting moment in time, circling kind of back to this question of, is this a section of space studies that we should be devoting time and resources to?
I think that to fail to devote time and resources to this at this point in particular would be a mistake. If we continue to think, for example, that there's only one kind of acceptable human for going to space, that's kind of a continuation of how we've been thinking about who is in and who is out and who is worth spending resources on and who isn't. So we've got a couple things happening, and one is sort of the democratization of space. So who is going to go? Is it just going to be, the Mercury 7 dudes? We've opened it up a little bit since then, since it's not just straight white, able-bodied, English-speaking, middle-class dudes that go to space. We are doing a better job, including more people, but we're still just kind of at the starting point. And then beyond that, we can't guarantee that just because we launch a mission with all able-bodied people on it, that when they arrive at their destination, even at Mars, will they still all be able-bodied? What happens to our crews who trust us and who we send out to space if we don't make their environment accessible? And so, for example, they get halfway to Mars and all of them, or many of them, start having trouble with their vision and can no longer see their computer screens. I mean, we know that there are eye conditions that you begin to experience in microgravity. So are we going to send people out with equipment that's not ready for that? That
Mhm.
seems like a breach of faith with them. So we have to be paying attention to not just the needs of the people we launch, but the needs that they will have a year from now on their way to Mars when their bodies change. Are we going to be are we going to have them in a situation where they can't survive because we didn't think about it? Oh, oopsie. We forgot that maybe you might get hurt on your way to Mars or you might become disabled. We've got to be ready for that.
Absolutely. And something that I learned when I was doing my studies in inclusion was that neurodiversity is the norm. And, what tends to happen is that invisible disabilities, people kind of hide them. People tuck them
Right.
away as best they can. And that is what society has kind of taught us until we've had this revolution of saying, okay, let's be honest. There's some supports that are going to help you to just have better time in life, have a better experience. And by that, you're going to be a better worker, be a better family member, be happier, point blank.
Mhm.
And so I am of the thoughts of having, we've got a long way to come to have total transparency of neurodiversity. However, there's a lot of folks in STEAM, STEM, in aerospace that are neurodiverse, and to go up is the dream. To go to space is the dream. And so my
That's the
curiosity
dream.
is always like, how many folks would hide the need of supports in order to have that perfect profile and be able to go up?
Right. Of course you would, because that's what they're asking you to do, right? I mean, anyone applying for a job is, going to walk in the first day and act like they are exactly what we're looking for. And if what we're looking for doesn't have anything to do with neurodiversity, of course
Mhm.
you'd mask, and you would, and people do, just try to fit the mold, which will not go well, a year from now when you're halfway to Mars.
Exactly.
And we could either pretend like that's not going to happen, or we could put our big kid pants on and acknowledge that that's how the world is, and then try to figure out how to deal with it with compassion and insight and care for one another.
Exactly. And I think, Earth is just the perfect place to be quote unquote experimenting. And let's have companies, big companies, allow for toolkits for folks access because, putting up your hand and saying, I needed some accommodations and supports in a company that doesn't foster that, that's hard. That's hard. The ramifications can be
Mhm.
many. And so folks mask as you said. So, I challenge companies to be open with accessibility, to let people, utilize what is needed and have flexibility built in. And you know what? You're going to have folks who are delivering because that's the bottom line. The shareholders are wanting their cash. And
Mhm.
the reality is, if you've got a population of folks working for you that are able to plug into the different accessibility needs, they're just going to perform better. They're going to have a better time. It's going to be a smoother run. And in due course, you will see more profit because of that.
Right. I mean, no, we act like what we want is the same identical worker, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
the illusion that we have, is we need everyone to be the same so we can all get by and get our business done. But really, to get your business done, if you want to get your business done well, you need a variety of people working in a variety of ways on a variety of problems. And that's not rocket science, right? That's just acknowledging, that's waking up in the real world and acknowledging the way things really are and being wise and making good choices.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you have had your fair share of zero G flights. I'm
I do.
interested. Can you tell us about them, your experience, and why they're an important tool in the research world?
It's funny. There's a lot of, when you hang around in the world, you see ads for zero G flights. And in the comments, there's always lots of people going, oh yeah, that's a rich kid's toy, and we don't need that, and that's excessive and whatever. And it was an amazing honor to be able to do this flight. And it was an amazing feeling. I think that there just isn't anything on Earth that's like it. People say that you feel like you're floating, but honestly, it's not like floating, because when you float in a pool or something like that, you still kind of know which way's up and which way's down. And it's still really clear that, in the water, you want your head kind of up, right? And feet kind of down. But if you suddenly have that sense of up and down just erased from your sensory scenario, there is no up anymore. There is no down anymore. It is hysterically funny. It is profoundly disorienting. And despite the fact that it's loud and cold and, if you're me, scary, because I'm a chicken, it is one of the most profoundly restful feelings that I've ever experienced. So that was all amazing. And the reason that many people do this is just to have that feeling, but also we don't get a lot of microgravity on Earth, right? Unless you jump off a building, and then that's not very long. And then the consequences are kind of bad at the bottom. But if we want to find out what a zero G environment will be like for different kinds of people, we might start by putting different kinds of people in zero G, even if it's for 20 seconds at a time. And so on our flights, which were sponsored by Astro Access, and thank you to all the folks that supported those flights and who gave of their time and their money to make it happen. What we did is we started to look at, so if you were in a microgravity environment and you were disabled, and we've flown many disabled people on these flights now, what kind of things would you need? What would be exactly the same? What is no big deal? And what kind of accommodations would I, for example, as a blind person, need in microgravity to make my lunch and do my science and have a nice time, interact with people, and be safe, and be able to perform, for example, safety things that you need to do to be able to react well in an emergency. So we know a lot about making accessible environments on Earth. We don't always do it, but we kind of know how. We're learning how. But what would that accessible environment look like in microgravity? And how do we deliberately take a step back, figure out what different kinds of bodies and minds would need in space, and then start designing those environments so that anyone who is a great scientist and needs to go to space to do their work can do it, or anyone as we progress and more people go to space, so that anyone can go, and so that we're not gatekeeping. This is a little 20-second, you get 20 seconds of microgravity, right? A little 20-second glimpse into the future of what we can be doing and what we maybe should be doing to make everything, especially the most exciting things humanity does, available to everybody.
Exactly. Zero G and suborbital flights have really opened up the door for folks to experience. These are short-term experiences. And so I really think it opens up the door for a longer space flight, gives the questions for folks that are designing these different vehicles. Okay, design for everybody because you never know who your next person is. And I kind of, as much as, at Space for Humanity, we really help to democratize access to space and send up and sponsor folks from all over the world. But there is kind of in the back of my head, I think there is this nice part that it is pay to play in that, are they going to send away someone who is paying that needs a certain accommodation, or are they going to say, yeah, we can figure it out? I think there's a little bit more push. I mean, they've brought up folks that have had conditions that I think, of course, they have medical teams and things like that, but in previous, the door would be completely closed to these
Yes.
people.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And really, honestly, right now, if what you're going to do is a suborbital flight, you're going to go pop up there, you're going to hang there for, a couple minutes, maybe get out of your seat, float around, get back in your seat, come back down. If your body can stand the stress of launch and reentry, that's all you really need. Once you get through that, you can do this. And I think that is maybe news to some people. And it's really good news because I think that we imagine barriers that aren't really there. So any blind person, any deaf person, folks with mobility disabilities, lots of us could go on a suborbital flight tomorrow and it'd be no big deal. Up, down, no big deal.
Exactly, exactly. I don't know if they intentionally, these billionaires intentionally set out to create these companies that are helping us, really advocate for having this door wide open and showing us, okay, yeah, if you can withstand the stressors of these flights, it's, giving us
Mhm.
evidence that you can do long term. But I think that's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing. And I know that they have the majority of their flights, it is pay to play, but they do sprinkle in and support different initiatives such as Space for Humanity. So I like seeing that. I hope to see more of that. But it's not as routine as one would think. Industry still does need to come a long way. And there also has been quite a lot of pushback from different folks as well on should we be doing suborbital, which equals space tourism.
I mean, you can't do everything perfect the first time. You can't run before you walk, right? Yeah, maybe it is space tourism right now, but while a subset of people are doing space tourism, that does leave the door open for others of us to be changing the story about who can really occupy space, who's really the right stuff. And I think it is partly about real stuff. What do I need? How do I get my wheelchair, up the ramp to the space vessel, and how do I transfer into the seat so I can launch up? That's a real thing. But the other thing that's happening is a bunch of stories that we tell ourselves about who are our astronauts, who are our heroes. And if you have a story in your head, for example, that blind people are sort of fragile and they kind of, maybe we're past selling pencils on the street now for most people. Maybe they're like, oh, maybe you don't need to do that, but we'll keep you home. You don't really need to work. Like we've got all these stories about what disabled people are like and what we can take. And thing one is that every disabled person on the planet is way the hell tougher than we're giving credit for, because that's how we live our lives, right? We've got to all the time, visible and invisible disabilities. We are all day long figuring stuff out, dealing with obstacles, figuring out a way around things, knocking into things, dealing with emotional and physical stress all day long. And so these, honestly, disabled people are some of the toughest people I have ever met. And that's not the story that we tell. We tell the story that disability makes you fragile, and disability actually makes you incredibly cognitively flexible and tough as hell. I mean, go watch one wheelchair rugby game. Just go ahead, right? Tough people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So tough, so resilient because, you know, lives have been needing to adapt, to overcome, to
Right.
go through to the other side, dealing with all kinds of things that, usually aren't public, aren't
Right.
talked about.
Right. And if you are physically fragile, and then it's true for some people, right? That your body is in a state where you are physically fragile. That does not mean that they're emotionally fragile, right? Again, these are tough people who deal with all kinds of stress and all kinds of hardship every single day. And if what you want is people who can take adversity and go, oh, that was a tough situation. Let's see how I'm going to manage it. Instead of curling up and crying in the corner, get yourself a room full of disabled people. Seriously.
Absolutely. And I touched earlier on the Citizen Astronaut program at Space for Humanity, where I have created the selection process as well as the training process. And so with selection, one key thing that I really felt passionately about and also want to really let people know is we do at the very beginning. So the first step we ask folks is a questionnaire. And we're looking at leadership, community development, and impact. On that questionnaire, we do take some demographic information as well. And we don't do that so that people are culled from the very beginning. We do that so that at the end, when I pull and go to our board and our funders, I can say like, hey, all the work we're doing in inclusion, that is important because we have X amount of applicants with disabilities. And there is a need to be supporting and pushing in this direction. And, we don't look at any of that at the very beginning. It is only at the very end. And I've made it so that they go through all the different rounds and we don't touch on that. They are just really, we're looking at the leadership, community development, and impact. Then at the very end, we would say, okay, logistics. Can you get to this flight? Do you have the time off of work and the capacity to potentially leave work or family? And then we go into, do you have any health concerns? And that's when we would bring up things like needs for some accessibility, accommodations, things like that. And so that person has already gotten to the very, 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 very end because it's important to me to get that demographic information and say, hey, our top 25 might need XYZ accommodations. They've scored really, really high. They might come up really, really high next time. Let's inform the people that we fly with what kind of accommodations they could see down the line. And also, if we haven't had someone win, but if someone were to win, then that is also kind of want to take that to flight providers and say, okay, talk to this person who through all of our vetting is like the
Mhm.
person. They're the next citizen astronaut. We are absolutely inspired by them. They are exactly who we envision flying. Now, you two have a conversation about why you can't create the supports that they need and
Right.
now that's a real human. Because theoretically it's easy to deny people and like, oh, that's tough, or it takes a few, $1,000. But really look at this like amazing because the folks at the end are amazing. So look at this person in the eye and tell them,
Mhm.
sorry, we're just not willing to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is really important. It's important. Just be upfront. If you're going to be that way, tell me why and tell me. And so that we can talk together about whether you saying no to me as a disabled person, is that a real thing? Is it a real thing? Like my spine won't take the force of launch and reentry? Okay. That's a real thing. Or is it just a story that you're telling yourself? Or is it somewhere in between? Is it like I'm telling myself the story that this accommodation will be really, really hard? Well, let's talk about that. Is it really, really hard? You're just getting into a This is going to be, if we survive as a species and continue to go to space, this is going to get to be kind of daily. It's going to get to be like going on an airplane, right? Or getting on a bus. And are you telling me I can't get on the human bus to go to space? Why are you saying that to me? And does it really make any sense?
Yeah, we're not shying away from really, really hard in so many aspects. So why is this one that it's like, oh, we'll figure that out
Right.
later? So now another aspect is we do have lower numbers of individuals with disabilities entering into STEAM and STEM fields. Why do you think that is? And what do you, in your experience
Mhm.
teaching in post-secondary, what have you seen as barriers that have stopped folks?
Mostly it's the stories. The stories that we tell each other about what disability is and who matters are the things that shape what we do. And primarily they shape our budgets. So if I've got a room full of first graders and I have a science curriculum, and it's going to take me a little extra time and trouble to make the science curriculum accessible. Am I going to do that? Is that a priority? Or am I just going to go, I'll worry about that later. Maybe if they really want it later on, we'll worry about it. But like in first grade, it doesn't really matter. So let's just set that aside. And then you tell yourself the same story in third grade. And then by fifth grade, you've told the story so many times to yourself that you believe it. And unfortunately, now the kids believe it too. So by fifth grade or so, kids are starting to think, am I a science geek nerd child? Or is that not for me? Am I just not the kind of person who does that? And it's not about ability, it's about stories. And the stories shape how we think about people and where we spend our money and where we spend our time. So we systematically sort kids into science kids and not science kids way at the beginning. And we might do that based on race. We might do that based on gender. And we definitely do it based on ability. So if you've got a room full of disabled kids and you're going to do a science program, are you going to do a science program that is, here, honey, glue this leaf to this piece of, construction paper and we'll write a word on it and that's your science project? Or are you going to say, all right, gang, there's a woods. Let's go into the woods. You find a tree. You tell me what kind, we're going to teach you to identify trees. And then you can harvest some leaves off the trees and then you can identify them. And then you can glue them on the piece of construction paper and put the word on it if that's what we want to do. We tell ourselves stories about who deserves science. And those are profoundly destructive and wrong stories because everyone deserves science. Science is not a gift that's given to particular children. Science is everybody's birthright. Every little kid that wakes up and goes, wow, I'm awake and alive in the world. What's it like? Let me poke at it and let me do things and let me knock things over and let me take things apart and let me, try things. Those little kids are future scientists, and that's all science. And we shut kids down really early. And then we take these kids and then we somehow magically expect that when they're in high school, we could go, oh, wait, here's a science camp.
Yeah.
And, maybe that can turn it around for kids, and that's good. Let's do the science camps. But we do it without acknowledging that they've been told their whole lives that they don't belong. And there's this trope that you can do anything you want, just believe in yourself and go forward. And that is not the way the human spirit works, right? We function in communities and we function with stories. And very few people are going to defy all the odds and on their own power make things happen. That's not how we do things. We do things in groups, we do things in communities, and we pay attention to one another and we listen to one another's stories. And so if you tell a kid their whole lives that they're not going to be a scientist and science doesn't belong to them, the kid is going to believe that. Why wouldn't they? There's no reason for them not to.
Wholeheartedly. Yeah, 100%. As a former educator who specialized in inclusion and the little kids, I love early intervention. Sounds intense, early intervention. It is truly just baking in inclusion while they're still in this sense of awe and wonder and
Yes.
and making them feel like they can do anything and anything is possible. Now, first thing, it's a ton of work
Mhm.
because the variables in that classroom can change all over the place.
Yes.
And so you need it doesn't matter how well trained you are. You need administration that supports you and a school district with funding because that is a lot for a teacher. You can do it, but you need a lot of supports. But another thing is just what I found is really having fun and also being diverse yourself. Something I found when I went to through my teaching degree was that I was like, "Oh my, we've got a lot of similarities of folks becoming teachers." I went through a stream that had like a university program that had 300 people graduating per semester, and a few of us kind of got together and were like, "Oh, are we the only representatives from minority
Mm.
groups? Are we the only?" So we had a lot of women, middle class, who had a very great experience in school. Okay. So then we didn't see a lot of neurodiversity. We didn't see a lot of physical diversity. We just didn't see that. And that ripples into subconsciously also what the kids see. The teachers are, you're such a leader, and your interest and your experience, you don't mean to, but it's really baked in. I mean, I taught at a school and teaching kindergarten, really trying to make it fun, really you're like a little magician at times, but something that I loved doing was I played the saxophone, hidden talent, and I just played music I loved. And I love Ray Charles, I love Stevie Wonder. It didn't cross my mind. A little added diversity, that's great, but it's like in the mix of the million things you're doing in kindergarten, you don't know what's going to be having a deep impact. And
Right.
some parents came to me during Meet the Teacher, which, still sweat. It's such an intimidating night. But Meet the Teacher, and they said, "Did you know that her brother is blind? And that by
Mm.
playing music, she's like obsessed and she makes us play it at home. And now she's really into Stevie Wonder and makes us play it all the time. And it's affected how she sees her brother's disability." Okay.
Right. Who do you represent as the heroes of your society? Are they all exactly like you, or do we have, and can we make a little bit of an effort to have to find, because it's not like they're not out there, right? There's all kinds of people doing all kinds of things. And do we make an effort to appreciate and enjoy and applaud people who are different than we are?
Exactly. Exactly. And so, in closing out here, we've got a lot of listeners that are just beginning into industry, and they're still finding their path. And so what would you say to that individual who's just getting started, interested in space science, the space industry? What advice would you give them?
Mm. Especially for disabled folk, right? If you pay attention to your world, which you do, you will find people that will tell you that you are Captain Fantastic just for drinking orange juice in the morning. And you will find people who will tell you that, in not so many words usually, that you don't belong and you can't do things. And partly because they're so excited about you drinking orange juice in the morning, you get the clear message that you're not capable of doing difficult things. And that really, it's too much of a pain in the ass for everybody if you try. So just quit it. Make it easier on us and stay home. And so you're surrounded by these messages. And so the most important thing, I think, is to find your people. Seek out the people that will be honest with you. Because maybe you're not good at math, and maybe that's going to matter in your field. If you want to be an engineer, you ought to be good at math. Okay. All right. Or, and you ought to have a way of dealing with math. And if that's just not something you're good at, that's good data for you to have. Maybe engineering is not where you're going to be, and be happy. So find the people who will be honest with you about what your abilities are, and then do things that you absolutely love. So, if your goal is to be an astronaut, that's terrific. Very few people get to be astronauts right now, but you can have that as a goal. But along the way, make sure that you're doing things that absolutely make you incandescent with happiness. And every day when you go into work, you don't have to feel joy just because you're doing paperwork or whatever nasty thing you have to do as part of your job. But you've got to make sure that the little things that you're doing every day, that you sprinkle in things that matter to you, and that you have a group of people around you that support you for who you actually really are, which probably means, if you're disabled, finding your cohort of other disabled people who you admire. That's what I do when I feel miserable and sad. I'm like, wait, where are my blind peeps? Okay, let me get reoriented here. Let me get readjusted. Let me recover from the messages that I'm getting every day, and immerse myself in my people and the people who will love me and tell me that they get it. And then, figure out where your filter is. right? You can't ignore everything everybody says to you because you live in the real world, but some things are worth ignoring for sure. And again, know that you will get messages all day long that you don't belong, but you've got to remember that science is not a privilege. Science is your birthright. Science belongs to you. There are a lot of people out there playing gatekeeper, but they have no business doing that and no right to do that. Science is yours. And be in a place where you can be at peace with that.
That's beautiful advice. Yes, science is for everyone and space is for everyone. So don't shy away from it.
And there are people out there who will help you. There are people out there. Find your mentor, right? Go find somebody and don't be afraid to. If I tell people when to go to conferences, especially conferences where there are lots of disabled folks, go home from this conference with 3 email addresses and then use them.
Absolutely, absolutely, because they have been you, and you know they
Yes.
might be too busy, and they'll be honest, but they're never going to hold it against you for asking for that mentorship.
100%. I have never met a disabled person who's like, no, heck with you. Don't email me. I got my stuff and I'm good. I don't need you. Every person I know who is in STEM, who is disabled, is willing to at least exchange an email with you. And some of us deliberately set aside time in our schedules to reach out and to be that person. So don't be shy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sheri. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Same. It's always so much fun.
Wonderful. Thank you, and see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Universal Inclusion Podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how to get involved in the space industry, follow us on Instagram and TikTok at universal_inclusion. Our passion is amplifying voices in STEAM, STEM, and the space industry. If you'd like to be a guest, shoot us a DM. And until next time, ad Astra.